And then there were two, Collingwood and Brisbane, to battle it out on grand final day 20 years after they went head-to-head in 2003. So much to dissect from this weekend's prelims, plus what happened to Charlie Curnow in September. This is Access All Areas, thanks to Crypto.com.
Get hands on a McCreary, around the corner, Collingwood are in front.
Stolen by McKenna, a piece of brilliance, a wonderful goal.
Listen to this noise. Collingwood are into the grand final.
And it's the Brisbane Lions who beat the Magpies in the 2023 AFL Grand Final.
Happy grand final week. It's the best time of the year. Don't worry about Christmas. Damian, Barrett and Matthew Lloyd are both here. And gents, do you feel like we got the final, well, the grand final that we all deserve, because it's 1 and 2 on the ladder, essentially?
I think we do, Nat, because, as you said, top two at the end of the season was Collingwood and the Brisbane Lions. I think Collingwood have just not allowed teams to score, the best defensive side in the comp, and then Brisbane, once they get a hold of you, they got a hold of Port in the first final, then Carlton. When they get their run going, they are hard to stop.
I love what they did post-season last year. Both lost prelim finals. Collingwood by a point, Brisbane by a whole lot more, but both went to work in the trade period. Dunkley comes in for the Lions, helps them win a prelim final. McStay comes in for the Pies. We'll talk about him and his heartaches soon, but without him playing in that prelim, they're not getting through.
All right, let's unpack the prelims first, and then we will get on to a grand final preview, and we'll start on Friday night, a thriller, and Lloydy. The Pies actually looked like they changed their game style, probably just before half-time, but that third term, geez, it was good. Yeah,
they had to take some risks, Nat. They couldn't score, so they had 2 goals to half-time, and that's not going to win you a final. So that to be bolder, and it started here. You could see, as I said, I thought it started just before half-time, but once he kicks this goal, Bobby Hill, the roar of the crowd and the energy, I love that from Maynard, fisting it away from Toby Green, and they just got leg speed. Jamie Alley, who had a quiet final, he got out the back. Howe came off his man, and this was a kick they couldn't pull off in the first quarter and a half, but they started to get movement going and the game started to change, and this was the period that won them the game. They kicked 5 goals to 2 in this period through the third quarter.
They've got many ways to just find a way, don't they, Lloydy? It wasn't working for them, and it was really, really poor for them, but they just persevere, and they eventually work it out and find a way.
Yeah, and I think that their defence stands up right throughout that, so they never let the scoreboard get away from them. So even if they have a quiet quarter or two, they're always still in the game.
Now, there's one Pie in particular who's becoming a September specialist. I'm talking about Jordan De Goey. He was immense, 34 touches, 13 clearances, and he kept them in the game in the first half. And then Damo, he stepped up.
Now, he's in the prime hitting zone of his life, sporting-wise. It's his 9th season. He's done it before in big moments. We have a look at the record in a moment of finals performances. But what he did on the weekend cannot be underestimated, and it was the grandest moment that he's played to this point, amongst many big moments in finals. His team loves what he does, the explosiveness. I mean, look at the touch here, Lloydy, and then to give it to the best player in your team, Dacos, in that situation, in those moments.
I think he'll be a tougher matchup for Dunkley than Cripps, because Cripps doesn't have the explosive power and speed that De Goey does. So Dunkley they'll send to him, but it's going to be a tougher matchup.
Yeah, we'll talk about that matchup in a moment. But let's look at De Goey's finals record at the moment, because clearly, Lloydy, he's thriving in September.
And Craig McRae spoke after the game and said he's training at such a level that he's expecting this, in a sense, because when you train that well, that sets you up for the weekend to perform. So when the balls come out, Jordan does. So I don't think he loves running 150s and 300s and 400s, but when they do a lot of contest training, and that's when De Goey's at his best.
So you think you want your big-time player on the field in the crucial moments when the game is in the balance, but with 6.5 minutes left in the game after Jesse Hogan kicked that goal, he could not get back on the ground. And Lloydy, explain this to me, because in my head, I'm just thinking, just pull anyone off, the closest player, but that doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. No. So there was no score in that whole 6 minutes. You see him at the end of the game. He's happy. So unfortunately, the play kept being on the opposite side of the field as well. So if you just have somebody charge off, you're one short in that moment. at one part of the ground. So that's just what you can't do.
I can't have it, Lloyd. I know that you're the footy expert, and I'm not trying to get into that space, but I can't have the best player in that game on the ground for 10 minutes. It was 6.5 minutes of game time. It ended up being 10 minutes. How you could not find one moment inside that 10 minutes to get someone off, to get the best player back on. And I understand it's 18 v 18, but if him coming off or taking a player off, that's going to cause panic in the opposition just getting that other player off.
What if it costs you a goal at that period or a score?
Well, what if
that's the game in itself.
But what if they lost the game by a point and he's sitting on the bench? We would be talking about this forever if he was sitting on the bench for 10 minutes and they lost.
The timing has to be perfect. That's all I'll say. And
no, they tell us it has to be perfect.
No, I don't know.
They can create a moment.
At school level, I yell scream at a kid who starts to run off at the wrong time. It only takes a split second and it hurts you. So the timing has to be perfect. Otherwise, you get cut up with that one man short.
Well, they survived and the Pies are into a grand final. As we know, Collingwood, they're just so well drilled. They train so many scenarios, Lloydy, and do so much one-on-one work. The last 2 minutes, they caused 8 stoppages, the Pies.
Yeah, it's why you need a good coaching panel. Craig McRae, Justin Lepich, Hayden Skipworth, Brendan Bolton. It's a fantastic panel that Craig's got. He would be nowhere near paid what the top coaches are, but he's got a great panel around him, and this is what they train.
You identified this element of their play, I reckon, about 3 months ago, Lloydy.
Yeah.
And just take the layman through what you're highlighting.
So they are it's like actors in a sense where they act like they want to get the ball, but they're not letting the ball bobble out. They want to keep it in close. So this is a final play where if you do win it and you have to kick it, you don't kick it central, because that's where the Giants have 3 players, because Collingwood have rolled players back behind the ball to hold on to the 1 point lead. So they'd be doing the opposite if they were 1 point down, to just hack the ball into space, get it out into space. But if you're 1 point up, you want to keep it in as tight as possible.
It was like they were professionally fumbling, weren't they?
Yeah, and they jump and the second player dives on top, just not let that ball out.
That's quite incredible. All right, time now for our crypto bold play, and it has to go to Steele Sidebottom, because not only did he deny a goal to Toby Green, but Damo, he was also very much smart enough to not let this go through for a rush behind.
The entire experience of that man on screen came into play in that moment. To your point, he could have just touched it over the line. Here's the options Toby Green had. Look, I'm not as critical as some on this. I mean, we can highlight the options he had. He nearly kicked the match-winning goal, and to do that is hard enough to then kick it out. Callum Brown too. Could he have come across Lloydy and try and force it through?
Yeah, I'm more critical of the first one. I think he should have passed Toby Green. You've got to open up your eyes and centre that ball, and that's Daniel Lloyd having a shot 30 metres out. I know it's easier from the commentary box to say he should have seen that, but he's good enough to see it. And could Brown have charged through, made body contact and spilt it through for a point? That's a question he'd be asking himself as well.
And then 4 grand finals for Steele Sidebottom and Scott Pendlebury. Obviously a winning one amongst that in the double whammy of the 2010 series. A losing one 11 and a losing 18, but it all came together in that moment to save it.
It was incredible, wasn't it? So from a Giants perspective, they were kind of wasteful in that last term, weren't they, Lloydy? Because moving forward inside 50, it just seemed like they'd lost their connection. Yeah,
they've been awesome and unbelievable. And they're a scary proposition next year. But you're right, they lost their dare, and everything we love about the Orange Tsunami wasn't there. So
what happened, Lloydy?
They just got too safe, and they've kicked to Toby Green too often. A bit like drawn like a Carey might be in a final, where just bombing it on his head in another situation. And Melbourne lost the final to Collingwood doing exactly this, just bombing straight down the line.
Is that Collingwood, though, making them do that? Or is it the moment?
I think, you become just try and take territory, whereas at the lower their eyes and just try and get the ball in a bit deeper than what they did.
All right, we'll talk more Giants in your exit lounge a little bit later on, but let's switch our focus now to the other preliminary final. It was Saturday at the Gabba. The Brisbane Lions obviously getting the chocolates, but it was Carlton who flew out of the blocks. They kicked the first 5 goals of the game. How did they turn it around, the Lions?
Well, they were getting smashed in the midfield. So Carlton owned the centre clearances. And so what happened was they had no field position and they couldn't get this going because they were under siege, the back line. But once the Brisbane midfield dominated clearance from second quarter onwards like this is exquisite here from Lachie Neale, the whole game changed. And when you start winning balls in the midfield, suddenly Coleman and McKenna, they can be more aggressive. They couldn't be aggressive at all. they were under siege in the first
Rainer
quarter.
here too,
Yeah.
Lloydy. He's had a good season and helped them get back into it.
Yeah, so this started. And so Carlton are disappointed because the first quarter, they didn't allow for this and they were spooked. Look at the time. Look at the Carlton players that just aren't laying a glove on the Brisbane Lions. And if you don't lay a glove on the Lions, they're the most dynamic team in the comp, and that's where it changed.
And then Connor McKenna comes in here, and that was his best game as a line nat. Again, another one they recruited last year after losing a prelim final, stood up in that moment.
So I think the first quarter Lions fans everywhere were shell-shocked at what happened, and they were very, very nervous, as too, I think, were the Lions players, who admitted as much after the game too, that there were a few nerves because they looked shaky. Damo, do you think the Pies can maybe take advantage of this on grand final
Look, they'll
day?
certainly try to, Nat, and they'll try to make something that I don't believe exists in a big way, that being the MCG factor on this game. They were 4 goals up against Melbourne late in the home and away season and got done, but it was all done in the last 7 minutes. I didn't look at that as being an MCG issue. These plays we're showing here, their timing's just only slightly off. I know it looks bad when you package it all up, and that was why they were 30 points down, but each one in isolation, it's only just marginally off where they wanted to be and what they wanted to do. So I'm not thinking that it's going to be a factor come bounce down on Saturday. I think they'll be benefit from having this moment.
You can look at it two ways. You can look at it that they hadn't played that often in 3 weeks because they only had the one game, because you have the week off, you win a prelim, another week off. But you could also look at it Collingwood's way and go, if we apply the heat and the pressure, can they fold on grand final day? And that's where Collingwood can win this game, through that pressure and not allowing the run and carry.
What about Kitty Coleman's game, though? Because he was in and out of the Brisbane side for a lot of this year, replaced Daniel Rich essentially, but he was superb, Lloydy, off half-back.
He was. To be best on ground in a preliminary final, that's something that he can talk about forever, particularly if they can go on and win this grand final. But these kicks... That's as good as anything in the competition that you'll see. These are just magnificent kicks. And again, you've got guys like McCreery and Ginnivan and those guys. You just can't give this guy time and space, otherwise he will cut you up. It was an outstanding performance.
Yeah, it was absolutely outstanding. Let's hope that he can replicate something like that on grand final day. Damo, a question for you now, because I think most of us thought that Charlie Curnow was probably going to tear apart September, who's the Coleman medalist, and by his lofty standards, just didn't really deliver.
Oh, he didn't deliver at all, Nat, and he has to live with that. And immediately, and this is going to sound harsh, but he has to come out of the best player in the competition conversations, and that's just a statement of fact in my eyes, Lloydy. He went into the season in that conversation. He came out of the 3 finals, I think, a fair way out of it, and he has to live with it. The 3 goals he had kicked only was not enough for his team, and it's going to be a long 6 months for him. He's a proud person, and he will live with it, but it wasn't ideal. Yeah,
I think finals don't often suit forwards. You don't see many forwards win the Norm Smith and all that, because it becomes a tight, hard affair. But as I said, you just got to compete hard, and it might not be your day, but you've got to bring others into it. And he just, I felt, didn't compete or work hard enough through this final series.
Lloyd, if you're the Blues, you're 5 goals up. I know it was early, it was the first quarter, but you're ruining your opportunity, aren't you?
You are. And to think that their best player behind Cripps or equal to Cripps didn't perform and they lose by 2 or 3 goals, they'd rue that.
All right, we're going to stick with Carlton because it's time now to enter Lloydy's exit lounge, and obviously we've got the Blues and the Giants in the gun. Stick with the Blues.
We'll start with the Blues and consistency through the season. So it's an exhausting way to play footy when you lose 8 of 9 through the middle part, and you're playing elimination finals pretty much for the back half of the season. So they need greater consistency. Look to be top 4 by the end of the season next year. Outside class, if it's not Jade Gresham, Hollands from the Gold Coast Suns could come and join his brother, which is something that they need, particularly if Dow moves on as well. And get Harry and Charlie functioning better together. So 2 Coleman medalists, but they never really play well in the same game.
What's the snapshot solution for that, if you give Michael Voss some off-season advice to get those 2 players functioning?
I think it's all about Harry and his footy smarts. I think that get Harry up higher, even get Harry into the ruck potentially at times. Try and have him like a Joe Danaher to take the pressure off him, because Charlie's fine despite his poor finals, but Harry's the one that needs to be better.
What about the Giants? What do they need to do in the off-season?
Well, I look at their forwards, and I think that Aaron Cadman, Lockie Keefe was the 3rd tall forward, and I think that he should go past. I know he was a young player, but he pumped games into Aaron Cadman and see what he can become. Can you get 30 or 40 goals out of him? In
year two.
In year two. So it's a goal.
Number one overall draft pick this time last year.
Yeah, and another 4 or 5 kilos over an off-season. That could take them to another level because Jesse Hogan was fantastic, but can Riccardi, can you trust Riccardi? So I think that's something they have to look to, and the outside run and ball use. So you've got your Callan Ward who was subbed out in a final. So can you get another player? They got high picks in the top 15. So can they get another Rolls Royce in there to help Kelly and obviously Finn Callaghan who was exceptional through the finals.
All right, let's look ahead now. Saturday, the MCG. We cannot wait. It's Collingwood and Brisbane. Matchups are plenty that are so mouth-watering. Lloydy, you mentioned it earlier before, but Dunkley v De Goey. This one is certainly going to be hotly anticipated.
As Damo said, Dunkley's made them. He's helped them get to this grand final, and he did a fantastic job on Cripps. But
when you said before it's a different matchup, just again explain why De Goey is different to Cripps in that Dunkley matchup sense.
Because Dunkley's not quick, and I think Cripps suits him because of the lack of leg speed, whereas De Goey's power. As a match of like Dunkley might struggle on a Dacos type as well because of that, and Danaher and Darcy Moore, that's going to be brilliant. And Harris Andrews is such a weapon, Damo. Myercheck has to occupy him. And what do you think of the Maynard Cameron one?
Well, it won't just be Maynard, will it? It's going to need some help from Quaynor and Howe to come across the top at various stages. And Harris Andrews deserves a mention too. I know you said Coleman was best on ground. I thought what Andrews did in the first quarter, particularly to stop the Blues, was crucial.
When it all boils down to it, is it as simple as the best defence in the competition is Collingwood out versus the best attack? Yeah,
that's a big part of it, Nat. But I think the two finals, Collingwood got hold of the Giants in the clearance, and then Brisbane got a hold of Carlton at clearance. So that's where it starts, really. What the midfield, whichever midfield gets on top, normally wins.
Damo, you alluded to it, but the grand final heartbreak, there are stories always every year. And Dan McStay, unfortunately, injuring his knee in that preliminary final, absolutely devastating for him. But what do the Pies do here? There are a couple of options for them, aren't there?
Well, the like for like, if there's such a thing, is Frampton to come in, but there's other options too to actually replace him with a smaller combination. Does Ginnivan come in outside of the 22 as a sub into the 22? Does Noble come back into the mix? Is Adams going to be trusted enough to get that soft tissue problem through? So I'd be going with Frampton, but you've got a different view.
Yeah, I'm not. I just wouldn't want Billy Frampton in the forward line. He's just not a natural forward for me, and I wouldn't put Howe down there either because Howe's a defender and he's a better defender. So yeah, I'd go smaller. Cox forward along with Myercheck and Smalls around them.
And the heartache too, Nat, too, with Brisbane Lions too, with Jack Payne.
Yeah.
Look, even if he gets through, I feel Darcy Gardner stepping up for just his third game of the year. He's got 10 years of experience behind him and stood up, didn't he, in a big moment in a prelim final. You know he's fit. He's 100% fit. There's going to be some doubt about Jack Payne being anywhere near 100%. And as much as he deserves a place, it's a risk. I'd be going with Gardner.
Yeah, the Lions say he'll be 70-30 chance to come into the side if he gets through main training, whatever that means. Lloydy, would you play him?
No, I'd stick with Gardner.
Yeah. Alrighty, I would like a grand final tip, please. Your margin, your team, and a Norm Smith. Lloydy?
Collingwood, 15 points, and I know it's the obvious, but I think Nick Dacos is the best player in the game.
Yeah, I like Brisbane in this. 7 points, and someone like a Zach Bailey, someone outside the obvious, I think will need to step up, and we know he can do it in big games.
Lions for me, 15 points, Norm Smith, Harris Andrews. Now, finally, before we go, I want to call this out. I'm calling out Lincoln McCarthy here for just being so greedy and stealing this moment from Darcy Gardner because Gardner's kicked a total of 5 goals in his career. He hasn't kicked one since 2019.
Would have sealed it.
And McCarthy robs him, Lloydy. You would have done that, though.
I know. I have done it before, but he was flat. He was flat, though, wasn't he, Damian?
I think he was flat when he took the mark.
Yeah,
what have I done?
He regretted what he did.
What he did, though, was take 30 seconds off the clock, which in a game where Carlton just kept coming, you can't underestimate that, but he was embarrassed.
No, I'd be filthy if I was Darcy Gardner. That is all we have time for. Please don't forget to join us on Monday next week on Access All Areas because we will wrap up the grand final. But in the meantime, enjoy what is a brilliant week.